We're going to start with the introduction to the DOM. So what is the DOM exactly? Does anyone have a good idea of what it is? Harlan? Yes, it's the document object model, but what is that? Absolutely. Everything you see on the page, yes? You can manipulate it, yes. All right. You can edit the HTML as well. The DOM. All right, so here it is. The document object model is the representation of the HTML as a tree, and I'm getting to that what that is, that can be manipulated with JavaScript. So, perfect example is, let's go to a website. I don't know, what's a website that you guys like? That's PG-13. Okay, sure. Twitter, and let's go to Coffee Dad. You guys don't want to see my Twitter. I have nothing on there. So the first thing is I know that there is something called the DOM, right? And what does that stand for again? Document Object Model. Meaning I can infer from that exact acronym. Oh, thank God. I'm blanking, right? It's that there is a object called document. Right? So what is it? Did you see how it highlighted everything? It is, in fact, all of your HTML. Right? So this whole thing is a document. Are there any questions on that? Right? Like all of your HTML, right? Like your head tags, these are all like, here's JavaScript, your CSS, things like that. Look at all this. Powerful. Cool. Then you have your body, right? Keyboard, okay. Oh, they hid this. Wow, smart. Visually hidden. Smart. So, all of this gets rendered and painted to the screen, and that becomes the DOM. Cool. Any questions on just the DOM by itself? Great. Now, the DOM is a tree, right? So, naturally, what is a tree in computer science? Because we're not thinking the same thing. We're not thinking like Christmas tree or like maple or oak, walnut. I'm not going to list any more. You get the point, right? The tree is a data structure within programming. In the same way that objects, right, like your key value pairs, your hashes, in Python they call them dictionaries, in Ruby they call them hashes. They're just key value pairs. Then you have other data structures like stacks and queues. There's arrays, there's linked lists. There's a tree that's a data structure. Cool? And all it really is it's a representation of how your HTML will look. So your document object model is in fact a tree, and that means that it has parent nodes, it has child nodes, and sibling nodes. So think of it as sort of this like upside down crazy looking tree. Cool? Where like the HTML is sort of this top, and then you have the body, and then from the body it spawns out all these other little branches. Yeah? This is actually what a tree would look like as like a data structure if you're not looking at it in this like amazing animation. It starts here, and then it branches off, and it has children. So this number 2 node has how many children? 2. Right? And then 7 and 5, what is the relationship between 7 and 5? They're siblings, right? What about 5? Does 5 have any children? Yes, how many? And which one is that? 9. So understanding that it's simply a data structure that you can manipulate, that you can traverse through, move between, as long as you understand the terminology. And that is sibling, child, and then naturally, what is the parent element of 5 and 11? Right? The parent element of 5 and 11 is this node element 6. Cool? So all of these, each individual one is known as a node. So far, so good? Yeah. This is a total typo. Yeah. Thanks for catching that. I was hoping no one would catch that, and I was going to glance over it gracefully, and that did not happen. No. But thank you for catching that. That 100% is a typo on this image. I didn't find a new one. I'm a dirtbag. I'm sorry. But feel free to continue asking these questions because that is something that, in my mind, if I caught, I would want to know the answer to. So thank you for asking. And I'm ashamed. But it's cool though, right? It's like for learning, right? So this is a complete typo. You shouldn't have like an element like clone itself later on. Cool. There should be unique elements. Cool. Now here's how you kind of look at it in a little bit of a different way. And that is you have your body tag, then you have like a div, right? And you'll learn later on in JavaScript, and especially when you get to React, div is life, right? Then you'll have h1, p tags, and then these like unordered lists. The Mod 3 will expect a basic level of understanding of HTML. So if you're having trouble with any of these, please let me know, and I will send out some resources about just learning basics of HTML. But none of these should be wildly unfamiliar, except for maybe this EM, right? Emphasis tag, all it does is like, I think it like italics your text. Sweet. So in the same way that we talked about the node elements of a tree, right? What is the parent element of these two LIs? It's this unordered list element, right? And does this unordered list have any siblings? What are they? Right? The H1 and the P tag are siblings of this unordered list. Does that make sense so far? It's like a family tree, except they're all like HTML elements. Right? Some of them go bad, like with the Lestranges. So, thank you for laughing. 10 points to Gryffindor. So, either way, the tree structure, right? There are usually several child nodes. And so here, right, it's easy to visualize this way. And this is the first time where you will be absolutely punished, just punished, if you do not indent your code. This is the first time, really, in Mod 3, where if you do not properly indent your code, please learn how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, I'd be happy to show you some resources, watch some videos. Please, if you do not do it, it is so painful, and it will become nearly impossible to debug your code, and then you will get stuck in what I affectionately call JavaScript hell. Cool? Are there any questions on just indenting code so far? Watch how useful it is. Great. Wow, look at this powerful indentation. Cool? This particular div, does this have any children? Yes, it does. And which one is that? You can see that because you can see where this div ends. Does that make sense? Let's take a look at what this exact block of code would look like without any indentations. Ready? Look at this. And let's do this. Cool. How many children does this div have? One. It has one child. Do you see how difficult this becomes? And this is literally 3 divs in an H1 tag. Let's take a look at this. Great. Okay. Do you want me to ask you the question, or are you guys like understanding the importance of indentation? Yeah? Cool. Yes, sir. How did you get those lines? Oh, yes. I'll send out something. Yeah, if you go to, if you press Command comma, right? I think it's in Core, possibly. Yeah, maybe Editor. Show indentation guide, this one right here. Default is false. Trying to set you up for failure. Wrong answer. Go ahead and check that to true. Cool? That's a very good question, and thank you for asking. Sweet. Please set that up. It's very useful. You see how like this can tell you exactly how many? All right. So that being said, this div, how many children does this div have? Try again. It's anything that starts on this line, right? So you have this one div, which then ends, and then a span that closes. So in fact, there are 2 children to this outer node div. Does that make sense? So far, so good? Sweet. Div is just it enters a line break, but does not display anything on the page. And so you'll want a lot of these because you want to be able to manipulate not just the ID or the class for both JavaScript and CSS, but also you want to be able to ensure that everything else inherits from them. And you'll learn more about that as you get really good with CSS. But you want to be able to add certain things to the page without adding any written value to the page. And this helps you. Cool? So like, for example. Cool. I know this is like an important question. So if I wanted to learn more about the div, what would I look up? I would just put div HTML, right? It's very important that you learn how to Google, and that is, you'll see me do it a lot. One, because I'm dumb and I forgot the syntax, which are 2 completely separate things, right? If you forget the syntax, doesn't mean you're dumb. I just also happen to be dumb. But the point is that I get to learn about these things, right? And I have to look them up because it's important that you learn how to reference these things. So let's hit try it yourself, cool? So in here, I can just throw a div, and then I can close this div. And if I run it, nothing should happen. Does that make sense? This is just a empty blank space HTML element, in which case I can then start nesting some elements. And then if I were to add another div, and then I close this bad boy, nothing should happen to the page. Right? And then in here, I can then have a little paragraph tag, indentation, it's important. And then I can have hello. Right? Then I'll see it. So this div essentially just adds like nothing to your page, but you're allowed to add some IDs and some classes and some other attributes that are important that we'll get into later on in the class. Is everyone cool on divs? Yeah?
How do IDs and classes behave differently?
Ooh, that's a very good question. IDs have a higher order of precedent over classes, and IDs specifically should only appear one time on your page. Other than that, no difference. So if you're going to style something with an ID or style something with a class, the ID will come and take precedent. And then what you don't want to do is you don't want to have an ID of like this. Can you see this? Is this too small? It's fine? Okay. And then also do ID of this. Because ID is supposed to be a unique identifier. If I have 2 IDs on the page, I'm not really identifying something as unique anymore. Right? However, if I wanted to, I should probably, if I wanted this, I can probably put a class, in which case it will throw no errors, and this would also make more sense. Yeah, that's a very good question. Any questions on ID classes and divs? All right. Hey, so do me a favor. This is actually something that I'm going to try for the first time ever, and that is, if I say, are there any questions, and then I wait like 3 seconds, just say no. That would be super helpful for me, because then I'll know like when to move on. I know it's also kind of tricky because then you don't want to like snuff out your friends, but like wait the 3 seconds. Otherwise, I have to tell myself that I'm gonna move on, which always gets kind of awkward. And then I get snarky because like I talk to myself. I'm like, hey, are there any questions? No, okay, great. And then like, I don't want you guys to feel bad. Just be like, no, Evans, move. I'm like, great. So I'm just gonna try it. If you don't like it, it doesn't work, we'll just go back. Awesome. Boop, boop, boop. Are there any questions? Oh, so money. Thanks. Wow, that was great. I like that. All right. I didn't like getting yelled at, but it's fine. Awesome. Cool. Do. Now comes the fun part when it comes to adding JavaScript, and that is we can actually select DOM nodes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to select some DOM nodes, and we're going to just kind of mess around. Ready? So there are ways to grab certain elements inside your HTML. This is where the internet becomes fun, and Mod 3 really is like a game changer for the internet and like your experience in the web. And that is, you can search for single elements, and you can search for multiple elements. So let's do that. The nice thing is, right, let's take a look at that HTML. Remember what I said about IDs and classes, right? Notice how this ID should only appear, and does in fact appear, one time. And then these classes, I can have these classes appear as many times as I wanted to, right? There's a difference between this and, right, and this. So the way classes are read is they are space separated, meaning powerful semantic is different from powerful and semantic. Does that make sense? Cool. So this is a very easy thing to do, right? If I wanted to grab the node of outer node, right, how would I do that? What unique identifier is located on this particular div that I've highlighted? An ID, right? Luckily for us, cool. Luckily for us, there is a very, very, very readable way, right, to get it. First thing you want to do is you want to talk to the document, and that is document, arrow. There is a method built on the document, and that is, if I wanted to get the element, and I know its ID, it is simply get element by ID. It's very easy to remember. This is a little bit on the older side, and I'll show you. So, what was that ID? Outer node. Cool. And what returns? I get this whole div that comes back, and I have access to it. Cool. And look, all of the children come down. So if I have this, I can say something like const, right, outer div equals to this document.getElementById, right? What do you think outer div is? Right, it's like that exact div from before. Right, I'm just storing it into a variable. Cool? So let's check to see what are the children of this. What do you think the name of this method might be? Children, first element child, last element child, right? Child nodes, something called append child, interesting. So let's take a look at children. And it gives me back something called an HTML collection. It gives me back an HTML collection. I'm going to ask you something that it's going to sound wacky. Is an HTML collection an array? No, right? An HTML collection is not an array. Therefore, if I see something like this, dot for each, what do you think will happen? Well, just what do you think will happen? For each is not a function. That makes sense because for each typically is a method defined on an array. And we very clearly established that an HTML collection is not an array. Remember the data types that you are using. What I don't want you to fall into, and this is a trap, is that, oh, well, I had the active record collection proxy in Rails. And it looked like an array. It had the curly brackets, right? Not the curly, the square brackets, right? Look like this. And I was able to run .each on them. I was able to run .first on it. That's because Rails and active record specifically imported those methods on there using the power of inheritance. Here, you always have to understand what data structure you're using so that you understand what methods you're allowed to call on it. Does that make sense? So what I can do is I can take this and I can create an array from this, which would then give me access to for each, right? And now I can iterate through properly over these like divs. So far, so good? That makes sense? So array from is just something new I'm introducing you to. I can create arrays from array-like objects. Yeah? That is exactly correct. And what it will do is it will, it'll iterate through, and then it will create an array object from the array-like object you pass in. Cool? So, any questions on just being able to select something and then being able to turn it into an array if you need to? And understanding the data structure, the data type rather, that you're using or manipulating. Cool? Great. So, first thing is, great. There's another way, right? So get element by ID, all right? That makes sense to grab one thing. If I wanted to grab a bunch of things, right? Like let's just say this is semantic, and this is semantic, right? Those are all 3 divs that have the same class. What would you look up or try to search for if you wanted to grab all 3 of these divs? The semantic class? Right? I would need to somehow be able to grab these elements by a common class name. Does that make sense? Luckily for us, there's literally, right, something called get elements by class name. So if I were to pass in semantic, I will get back just these 2. Oh, did I not save it? Oh, I didn't save it, so I didn't refresh. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Like I didn't save the HTML file when I added semantic to the 3rd one. So in my current state, I only have 2 divs with the class semantic. So far, so good? Cool. Awesome. And so what does this return me? Yes, the divs that have the class name semantic, right? Specifically inside a object known as a HTML collection. Cool? And so here you can see the, I don't want to go into Proto yet, but you can't really iterate through those because it's an HTML collection. Luckily for us, there's a new way to grab these elements. So it's important to understand get element by ID and get elements by class name. However, now there's something called, so on the document, right, you can do something called query selector. In the same way that CSS works, right, this query selector, does this know whether or not it's specifically an ID or a class? No, I have to tell it. So I'm just going to simply say this hashtag for IDs, and I'm just going to say outer node. What is that? Yeah. And it will give me that. If, however, I'm going to grab multiple elements, right, and say I have a class, right, semantic, I'm going to use the dot. This is how CSS selectors work, and it works the same way for the query selector. Are there any questions on this? All right, selector will always return how many elements based on the English and the way it sounds? 1. What will that return me? All of them, right? So if I want multiple, query selector all. But what does this return me? A node list, right? Here, I would then check to see, hey, can I iterate through a node list? Do I have access to something like for each on this? Does that make sense? Like, this is like part of the thought process and the debugging about how to get to the next level, about jumping into something, asking the right questions, and then simply being able to Google, search, and find out. Yeah? I guess like hitting that like lunchtime sleepiness. Summertime sadness. Cool. All right. So, all right. The node list allows you for each, right? And so I put a little cheat sheet on the bottom here. Ooh. And these are ways to be able to grab elements from the DOM. All right. So I have a get element by ID, returns a single element. Get elements, all right, collection. So you have class name, and then what is tag name? Exactly. So whenever you say things like, I'm gonna put a P tag here, I'm gonna put an H1 tag here, it is like literally the actual element, the div tag. So if I were to run something like document.getElements by tag name and put in div, I would get all of these divs. Does that make sense? Cool. Tells you what it returns, specifically the type. And then can I call for each? No, 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 yes, on the node list. Cool. This is going to be useful as we kind of demonstrate and go into like the next parts. But for right now, let's have some fun. It's interesting to see this H1, right? What does this say? Internet memes, right? And what does this say? Is it safe to assume then that inside this outer node, inside this div, in this div, in this div, that there's an H1 tag that is painting that to the screen? Cool. What if I wanted something else, right? Like Rugrats. Wow. 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 Cool, right? So what if we had, I don't know, it's New York Times. Cool. Let's do this. Let's change an article. I do this to my friends all the time. Yeah, and I take screenshots. So what I'll do is I'll just go boop, 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 and I'll just grab this, right? So I can use this to select elements, right? When I click this, it puts me in this like selector mode. And look at this, an H2, cool. Once I click it, it tells me exactly what it is. And so I can see that the text matches up perfectly. So I can just change this to, okay, I don't know. Mike Chang is back. It's Mike B. Okay, let's leave that alone. Like Brittany, you know what I'm saying? All right, just me. Anyways, and there it is. I will tell you that typically every 4 years when the Olympics happen, I always go and I change it to like Wang Tron wins gold, and I just put a picture of me on there. And I'm like crossing the finish line, and I screenshot it to my friends. Like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, it's on the New York Times. You should have seen it. It was wild. And so, yeah, like, oh man, let's do that actually. Cool. Great. We can go right back here. Come here, you. Where's this div? Come here. It's too much. Too much. Let's give this console a little more space. All right, let's do this. Cool. And instead, we're going to change this to, what's your class name? Oh my God, get this bread. It's the best, right? And then you just do a little this magic, right? Boom. And then you go ahead and Slack your friends, and you tell them, boop, like, yo, get this bread, what's on the New York Times. I mean, you could chase the rest of the articles, you know? But there it is. It's hot off the press. Cool. If you want to take screenshots, it's Command-Shift-4. I mean, Command-Control-Shift-4, and that will take the screenshot and just put it inside your clipboard, so you can just paste it. If you don't put Control, you just put Command-Shift-4, it'll take a screenshot that saves to your desktop. Cool. I mean, what you learn, you'll be able to build anything you want. I think if you were, unfortunately, we don't have like a Mod 3 science fair, but the last Mod 3, um, there were a couple of games, and yeah, once you get good at DOM manipulation, man, it just becomes fun. It just becomes really fun. Yeah. Oh, weird bugs, but super fun. And we'll learn, and you'll teach. I'll teach you all that. Cool. So, yeah, get this bread. God, what a great class name. Um, yeah, it's awesome. So, in the same way that I assumed that you would have some level of HTML understanding, let's do that. Let's add some dank memes to this page. Right? Before we do that, actually, let's do this. Let's go here, right? And let's think through the process in which we need to be able to add like an image to the page, right? Let's think through. Here we can go back to the elements and we can see there's something called add images here, right? That's literally inside my HTML right here. Cool. Luckily for me, I have an ID of container. Something that's really important for me to point out is, let's just say for whatever reason, I did not have this ID of container on this page and I simply refreshed. And I want to add images to this div, right? So that my images come here. Does that make sense? I want to be able to like literally add images right here on this div so they can appear on the screen. Is there a way that I can grab this div off the page as it stands right now? I mean, probably, but it's kind of hacky, right? I have to like query select all the divs and then iterate through, find like the fourth one or whatever it is, and then bam, I finally have the div that I'm looking for, right? Is there anything we can do right now to give this an ID or a class, something that's easier for us to be able to grab this div? Is there anything we can do? You'd be surprised how difficult that is for some people to conceptualize, right? Like, you're the developer. If you want to grab a div and you want to be able to add a unique value to it, like, man, it'd be so nice if that div had like an ID. Oh my God, watch the master at work, right? Div ID container, cool? It sounds silly, but I'm only pointing this out because I want to emphasize that you're completely in control and that you're the full stack developer. And so if you wanted something to happen on the page, just make it happen on the page. It sounds silly, but trust me, it's okay. I will probably remind you several times. But yeah, you just add it, right? It's your website. It's your world. I just live in it. Cool. Awesome. So now that this ID is here, right, what's something I can do? How would I be able to grab that? Yeah, let's do that. Do you guys want to get element by ID or do you want to query select it? Okay. Always query select. If you see me writing this trash, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say trash. It's like a bit on the older side. If you see me writing that, it's because I grew up writing that and it's just like by default what I do. But I really should be transitioning to this. Cool. And how does query selector work? Takes an argument, absolutely. And what do I want to pass in? The ID, but how do I specify ID? And what is it called? Container, right? And boom, now I have this ID, right? I probably want to store it, so I can just do a little const, right? Image container equals to this bad boy, bloop, bloop. So now I have image container, cool. So let's think through the steps in which I would need to execute this code. All right, so let me do this real quick. I'm simply going to do this. Bloop, bloop. I said bloop. Cool. All right, and all I'm going to do is get rid of the console for a second. Actually, I need that thing. Embarrassing. I'm going to put it on the bottom. Is that cool? And so you can see the code side by side about what's happening. So the first thing that makes sense is if I want to add images to my website, the first thing I need to do is figure out where I am going to add these images to. Right? That makes sense. Right? I need to actually be able to add the images somehow. Right? But where am I going to add them? That makes sense to kind of like get out of the way, right? I want to add it to this like image container, this div. It's going to hold all my images. So the next thing is, how do I actually create an image on a website? Let's find out, right? There we go, put an image on website. No, HTML, does that make sense? Wow, cool. Images, who's seen the image tag before? So what does this do? What does this do right here? Right, it just puts an image on the page, right? That makes sense. So far, so good. So I need to be able to, what? How do I add images to the page? Just in plain English, what are the thoughts and the process in which we would need to be able to add the image to the page? I know where I'm going to add it, right? There's like this div I'm going to throw all my images on. Well, first I need an image, right? I need a literal image tag. That's how I determine what is on my page, right? So for example, if I had multiple of these, how many should I see? Right? So in order to add an image to a page, I will need to create a what? Right, image tag. So I need to be able to like create, right, the element or the tag that I want to add. Right? Yeah, so far so good? Great. Create image tag JavaScript. Actually, this is all trash. Whenever you're looking up something in JavaScript, MDN. Cool? Great. So there's something called image element. What else? How can I do this? What do you think? This image element? Let's not do this one. This is really good, but it's not the point that I'm trying to make. Images in HTML. Wow. Looks like this image tag would be really money. Really money. Dang it. I just had it on this one. Cool. This is what I'm looking for, actually. Eventually you'll find it, right? Something called document.createElement. As I'm looking through, it just needs a tag name as an argument. Cool? So far, so good? So I can literally do something like document.createElement and pass in the tag name that I want. Right? So I can have a const, right? So like image tag equals to this image. Yeah? Great. Let's actually find out. I refresh and I say, what is image tag? It's just an image, like literally the tag. Let's go back here. How do I actually give it an image? You've seen it before, right? Source, right? And source or alt or width or height are what in regards to image tags? They're attributes, right? The source, this alternative, this height, these are attributes of the image class. Cool? So far, so good? Let's play with this real quick. If I have the image tag, right, can I do something like source and then equal to something, right? Some link. Can I do that? It didn't like that. So, I need to be able to add an attribute to image. JavaScript add attribute to image. Cool. Set attribute. Wow, what's this? I can set attribute. Okay, interesting. Set attribute this, and then I can tell it what to do. Element dot style. So this is bad, right? It literally tells you bad. So how do we do this? How can I set the attribute? What do you guys want to look up? What do you guys want to do? Let's walk through it. Hmm? Right. What happened here? Did you guys read the error? What does it say? Okay, but what does image tag actually have? All right, so even as you're Googling through these things, like read them. Cool? You don't want to be calling .set attribute. You literally want to be setting it directly. The problem is when I did this, if you actually read the error, it just says file not found. It didn't mean that it didn't work. This is a practice on reading the error and just testing. Right? So I can do something like the image tag dot source is equal to, I don't know. I have something here. That's fun. Cool. And I can set that image source to be this. So if I refresh and I see what is image tag, it's this image with this source. Right? So now what I really want to do is, right, so like add the source for image, right, in the newly created image tag, which makes sense. And then what do I need to do now? What's like the next step in your mind? This image, it has a source. What should I do now? I should be able to put it on the page somehow, right? Notice in my elements in this container, I don't actually have the image tag here. I want to be able to add the image tag here somehow, right? So like instead of add images here, let's put Netflix adaptation of the Rugrats for fun. And there it is, Netflix adaptation of the Rugrats. What I really want to do is in this container, I want to be able to add on this new element. So far, so good? Great, let's do that. HTML or JavaScript, right? So JavaScript add element to, I don't know, a div, something like that. Let's just see what comes up. Something called append child. I don't know what this does. Let's find out. Great, I created this text, append child with this like node element. Okay, sure, great. Does that make sense? Right, what do I want to append this to? What do I want to append this brand new child to? The container, right? Do I have access to the container already? So can I do image container dot append child, passing in this image tag I just created? Cool, let's see what happens. Oh man, look at that. My God. That's me and my brother. Look at this hover. You saw that hover action? That's the CSS. Rock, paper, scissors, I won, so I'm Lil, obviously. Cool. Does anyone have any questions as to like the thought process, how I literally Googled my way through to figure out how to do something? Right? So add the image to the div or container that you want to add it to. So what does this actually look like? Well, let's take a look. Inside my container, I now have a new image tag with this source because I added it to this container. I appended a new child to this container. Are there any questions as to how that happened? All right, so I'm going to move a little bit faster. I have some code here. Cool. So what I can do is I want to be able to add these dank memes, right? I have the body, because that's just a tag. I have something called dank memes, right? Where is dank memes coming from? Literally a file called dank memes. And these are just an array of dank memes. Cool? So far, so good? For each takes a callback, right? And inside each of these dank memes, there are going to be what? Just like URLs, right? So I just put meme URL. I simply made a new image. And then for each, not only did I make the new image, I changed the source to the meme URL, which as you can see is just going to be this and this and this. And then I take the body and then I append the image. So what I can do is I can get rid of this trash. Cool. It's just a picture of me, don't worry, I'm not missing anything. And then if I refresh, what do you think I will see? All right, a bunch of these dank memes. Are there any questions on HTML as like a markup language? So like divs, images, attributes, being able to select an attribute. I'm sorry, being able to add an attribute, being able to, all right, I'll just let you like look through this for a second. I know you want to, right? Cool. Like the power of iteration, right? Creating an element, understanding the DOM and how to manipulate it. Literally, it's just the thought process, right? Like, can you do the logic? The rest is Googleable. And that's all I'm here to try to teach you. Yeah, I'm gonna throw in some like syntax and stuff, but I want you to be able to do it on your own. Are there any questions? Oh, right. If going to crash into each other, run a function called don't. So they're fine. All right, hey, that's all I got for you today. Thanks so much.